Welcome into the A-List podcast. I'm Kwani A. Lunis, joined by A. Sherrod Blakely. Sherrod, the season is finally over.
It is. It's finally over, and then the new season begins, because really there is no such thing as an off season in the NBA. You just go from playing games to playing the waiting game to playing who's got game for next season. And this year is obviously not going to be any different. But the Celtics, it's going to be very different when you look at the roles that folks will be playing. We kind of knew that they probably needed a shakeup, but I don't think people necessarily thought it would be Danny flashing us all the deuces sign, and then Brad just kind of, shuffling over into that top spot as the president of basketball operations. Just what are your thoughts on that, and just this new regime that will be part of the Celtics organization now?
My tweet when I saw the news break said, this was not on my 2021 bingo card, because as you mentioned, that was not a move that I expected, especially generally speaking in the NBA after having a season like that. People, thought that maybe he would have eventually, his deal had been extended. So we knew that he would be with the Celtics organization, but I don't think anyone realized or thought or predicted that he would be elevated to the front office in that role. So a lot of people have been saying this, and I agree. Now we're going to be able to see what Brad really thinks about the players that were on his team and what moves he's willing to make, and if he could be a successful front office manager of this team and maybe bring them to the championship that they said they are willing to go die. What did they say? Dying? I forgot the terminology, but it was basically like they're going to do it or die trying, essentially, and try to get a championship in Boston.
Well, here's the thing. When the news came down, and this is just kind of how my brain works, which I'll readily admit can be a little bit way the hell out in left field. But I thought about Adam and Eve, and I thought about them from as far as the wisdom that they gained unintentionally, and how that wisdom completely changed the way they viewed everything around them. And I look at Brad Stevens when he first came to Boston. Hey, Danny, just give me whatever you want. I'm going to figure out a way to make it work. Give me any player you want. And then after a while, he realized, but damn, Danny gave me this guy, and he doesn't really work with what I want to do. I got that guy. He doesn't really work what I want to do. And now all of a sudden, I think Brad realized that I can't just be taking whatever the hell he gives me. I need certain types of players. And if I'm not going to have a voice in that, that's going to make it hard for me to do my job. And I think this year was an example of what happens when you inherit a lot of kids that really aren't the kids that you can rock and roll with. And so I think Brad realized that, this isn't working. And I do think that when Danny Ainge talked a lot about how this isn't on Brad, this is on me, I put this roster together. Looking at it in retrospect, I get the feeling that was part of some of the conversations that they had. That after the fact, that Brad made it clear that this guy doesn't really work with what we're trying to do, because I want a guy who can do X, Y, Z, 1, 2, 3, and this guy does Q. This guy does R, and that ain't working for what we do. And so I think that Brad recognized I can't be the best I can be as a coach if I don't have more say. And I think Danny probably realized, okay, well, this isn't working for me. What I'm doing, I just don't think Danny had that same fire to do the job as he had earlier. And to me, it made sense in a lot of ways, because the Celtics like to do things in as seamless a manner as possible. So it made sense for them to slide Danny out and for Brad to slide right in. But the one thing, and I've talked with a few executives about this, that I guess the best way to describe it, it raised some eyebrows among their group, is that Brad had, by all accounts, a down year in a job that he did. And down year relative to the expectation and the standard of excellence that he has set for this franchise as the head coach. And to go from having a down year in the job that you normally do to not just keeping your job, but getting the promotion of all promotions. I mean, it would be just like, if you are, a data analyst and you get some numbers wrong. You then replace your boss. That's not
That's
quite how this stuff
not
usually
how America
works.
usually
And
works.
so and what one executive pointed out to me was, remember, Doc Rivers left because he didn't want to do a rebuild and he wanted to have more say in
Mm,
how the team was put together. And so the Celtics response was, well, we can trade you and you can go somewhere and get that responsibility. And granted, Doc did not do a very good job as a GM when he was at the Clippers. And I get that, but they gave him an opportunity, which is what the Celtics, in hindsight, weren't really willing to do then, but they were willing to do that with Brad Stevens. So it raises a lot of questions that I think uh, put a different kind of pressure on Brad to do well in his job, because just like when Brad made the transition from college basketball to the NBA, he didn't necessarily have the typical cookie cutter credentials. Did a great job at Butler. You give him mad props for that, but that doesn't necessarily make you a good NBA coach, particularly when you look at the number of college coaches who came to the NBA and who
yeah,
sucked.
failed.
Brad did not suck. Brad clearly showed that he could coach at this level. But again, he's going into another area of the NBA where his credentials don't necessarily align with the position. And yet he's getting that opportunity. And will he make the most of it like he did, I thought, for the most part as the Celtics head coach, or will he struggle? And if he struggles, it's going to raise, again, a lot of those same questions. Why exactly did you put him in that position again when you knew he didn't necessarily have the receipts, credentials, or experience for that? Again, I think Brad's going to have a different kind of pressure on him now, but it's in many ways, I think, more pressure than he had as a head coach. Because
Yeah.
as a coach, you play who they give you. Now you're the one putting your coach in position to be successful. And if you don't do a good job, we're all going to know.
Yep.
So I'm curious to see how all that's going to play out.
I am as well. It's going to be a very interesting offseason for these Celtics.
Absolutely. And obviously lots of questions about the future of the franchise. And we're going to get some of those uh, ideas and answers from our good friend Gary Washburn of the Boston Globe. Gary had some time constraint issues, so we had to tape him a little bit earlier than we normally do. And since Kwani's got the muy importante job and I don't, as a teacher, this is kind of my free time. I'm like major flexible. So Gary and I had a conversation about the Celtics and just this season that was and the seasons ahead. And we talked to Brad and we talked about obviously Danny retiring, Brad
What's
coming
up,
in, and also
let's listen to it.
and we talked about the new Celtics head coach. But I'm going to leave it at that and let Gary in my conversation let you in on what we talked about. So here we go with Gary Washburn. Gary, how you doing today, my friend?
I'm great. Everything is good.
Oh, you sound so enthusiastic and
I
eager and
am.
excited about
I'm
the off season.
ecstatic about this opportunity to talk 45 minutes or an hour with Sherrod lately.
I
Yeah,
hate
I
you,
mean,
Gary Washburn. I hate you. I really do. I really do. I
let
don't
me
know. I
chop,
don't know.
let me
I
chop
don't know.
something else off my bucket list.
You know what, man? If we weren't live and everything, I would say some things that would probably get the FCC on my ass. But I'm gonna leave it at that. But what I do want to talk to you about, though, I mean, obviously the biggest story around here is the shakeup with the Celtics. Danny retiring, Brad Stevens taking over as president of basketball ops. I mean, did that catch you as off guard as it seemed to catch a lot of us?
Not as much in terms of Danny. I thought Danny was getting tired. I think he, at some cases, was like letting go of the rope, and I think he was frustrated with the process of trying to improve the roster.
Mm-hmm.
I think that it was just wearing on him, and I just think if you look at some of the things he said this year, like he was going to wait till the off season to use the trade exception, and like it was sort of like he was just trying to get through this year and get to a full season, and maybe he just didn't have the fervor or enthusiasm for the job. Brad going up to president, I was stunned, but I also thought that this year, if things were the same and Danny had stayed, that Brad was going to ask for more power in how the roster was built. I don't think he liked this roster. I think he bit his tongue on several occasions in terms of trying to criticizing the roster and not criticizing the roster. And I think he wanted some more input on how this roster was built. So now he has all the input. So, you never know what you ask for. You just might get it, I guess. So I was stunned at that, but the Danny thing, not as much.
Well, the thing about Brad, and you know this, just having been around here a while, is that those first couple of years, I mean, Danny was flipping players left and right, and Brad just kind of went with the punches. But it seemed that over that period of time, Brad understood just how important roster development was, and how if you don't get that right, it makes the job of the head coach incredibly difficult, and particularly when you're tasked with coaching players that may not necessarily be your kind of players. And so when I think about Brad and this new role that he's in, I'm curious, how challenging do you think it's going to be for him to really create that level of separation that has to be there from you being Brad, a head coach, trying to put guys on the floor that you would like to coach, versus being the GM and putting guys on the floor that your head coach can have the most success with and can get the most out of? How do you think he's going to handle that dynamic?
I think that he'll create a partnership more with the coach. He'll bring in someone with experience and with a real voice who knows the league. And I think that they will partner together. I think that Brad will be in charge, but I think he'll have use the coach as an ally and as kind of an assistant general manager in that sense. But I think that I think he'll adjust to anything he puts his mind to it. He's a smart guy. And obviously it's something that he wanted. So let's see. I don't want to say, he'll never be able to let go of the rope in terms of being a coach, or he'll try to coach the team from the president's box. I think he'll allow the coach to be the coach. Obviously, it's going to be likely a very new staff, a lot of fresh new faces, new voices. I think he'll take those voices into account, but I think he'll also try to put together a philosophy of how you want to play, like the Daryl Morey style in a sense, and how you want to put together a roster that fits that style of play, which means probably a lot of players who are currently on the roster are probably going to be out. So it's probably going to be a very new, fresh roster. But I think he's capable of the job. I think he's so smart that he'll pick it up in terms of talking with agents and negotiating and all the little idiosyncrasies you have to do to be a general manager, president of basketball operations.
Yeah, I mean, obviously the focus right now for a lot of folks, a lot of Celtics fans, is on what's the next step. What is Brad going to do to get this team back to where they're one of the top tier teams competing? But before we get too far down that road, I mean, Danny was in this role for a long time. One of the longer standing, persons in that position throughout the NBA. He, as a GM, got this franchise its only title in the last 35 years. I think a lot of people they kind of gloss over that fact. What do you think it will be the legacy that Danny leaves behind and in the role that he was in for so many years here in Boston?
I think he helped resurrect the franchise back to the prosperity that it thinks it should be at, and the point it should be at a contender in the East every year. Making the playoffs, however long, since from 13 out of the last 14 years, that type of success, the one championship, putting together the original, quote unquote, original big three, like the original second generation big three, and digging the organization out of some tough times in the late 90s and early 2000s, that after effects of the death of Reggie Lewis, some bad drafts, missing out on Tim Duncan in the lottery, the kind of not putting a good trading Chauncey Billups after 51 games, not putting a good roster around Pierce and Antoine Walker, and just signing a bunch of guys who just were never real Celtics and never really just being another team, to being where the Celtics were booed on the road and they were coming to kick butt in your stadium. I think he'll get credit for that. I think he should. I think the biggest thing, the one thing that probably, if the Big Three had won that championship in 2010, I think his legacy would be a lot different. A lot of things might not have changed. Maybe Ray Allen doesn't leave. Maybe the big three doesn't get broken up. If they get 2 titles in 3 years, who knows how that all goes down? Because obviously that summer, LeBron joins the Heat, then everything changed. The Celtics lost their grip on the East the minute that happened, the minute LeBron made his decision. So Danny, let's be honest. I mean, it was a lot like the 90s and with Michael Jordan in terms of denying Patrick Ewing and Charles Barkley, a lot of guys championships. It was the same. LeBron blocked the Celtics from going to the finals, 3 times, 4 times. I think the semifinals, and then 1 time in the finals with Miami and 2 times with Cleveland in his second go around. So if not for LeBron, Danny has probably a much better legacy. He still has a great legacy. He'll go down as one of the great GMs of this generation. But I also think there were some troublesome things over the last couple of years, some missed drafts, some non-signings, things that didn't get done that probably brings it down a tad.
Yeah, I would agree. I can't get over the fact that, and a lot of Celtics fans, I don't think they really want to embrace this truth. But as much as they talk about this franchise story history, they got 1 chip in the last 35 years, and that was the KG group. That's it. And when you start looking at teams throughout the NBA in that 35 or so year window, you've got 7 teams that have won multiple championships within that period. And so I guess what I'm thinking, Gary, is the Celtics, they have this historical mystique and things of that nature. But how realistic is that in today's NBA when you look at where they are, when you look at San Antonio, Miami, teams that, if you look at the grand spectrum of NBA history, maybe don't compare it to the Celtics, but if you look at the last 30, 40 years, they're as good, if not better, than the Celtics organization. How do you think the Celtics are going to just be able to, I guess, augment that longstanding history and find ways to get back to being, a power in the East or in the NBA for that matter?
Well, I don't think that you're going to have, unless you can flip Tatum and Brown into like a dynasty. There's too many great players in this league, and there's too many, teams that can just come up with big threes and dynasties. Like look at Brooklyn. They spun, they suffered for a while, spun 2 cap slots into Kyrie and KD, and then traded for James Harden. I mean, that's just going to happen. I mean, I think because back in those days, the players stayed with teams pretty much throughout their entire career. In the 80s, Bird, Magic all stayed with their teams, or unless you were getting old and you still wanted to play, and you might go to another team after that, like Max did. But those days are over, and the Celtics are going to have to be content with building a team that can compete for Eastern Conference every year. But there's going to be ups and there's going to be second-round eliminations, or like this year, a first-round elimination. Some of that's going to happen because you're going to have age, attrition, disappointing signings, salary cap limitations, situations like Kemba Walker just not fulfilling, his contract in terms of just because of injury, not living up to that max deal. Like things like that are going to happen. So I think that today's NBA fan, I would hope, would be a little bit more understanding and not expect, 3 titles in 6 years that the Celtics won in the 1980s. They're going to have to, you're trying to make a run. That's why I think the 2010 year was so costly for the franchise. Just, being up 3-2, basically scoring 67 points in game 6, then playing a terrible game, and Perk tears his knee up in that game. In game 7, you lead, and then Rashid, kind of taps out because he's exhausted. He's been drinking beers and stuff during the regular season. He just hasn't.
Meta World Peace has the game of his life.
Yeah, and Derek Fisher and Gasol gets a couple of offensive rebounds. Kobe only went 6 for 24 in that game, but lived at the free throw line in the fourth quarter. If you win that game, okay, and you got 2 and 3 years, I think the whole complexion of the Ainge era and the Big Three era it's different because you got 2 chips to hold on to and not just one. But that's what you have to hope for. Just compete every year, put a solid product on the floor, and draft well. Danny drafted well. Danny leaves Brad with some great chips. Tatum and Brown, a couple of this draft I thought was decent with Neesmith and Pritchard. So you've got a base. You don't have a championship base, but you have a base, and you got to figure out how to take it to the next level. I think it's possible, but I think the Celtics are out of the late 90s, early 2000s lottery, just 40, 41, and 41. I think they're out of that. As long as Tatum and Brown are there, they keep those guys happy, I think they're competing.
Now, Gary, you had mentioned a name a little bit earlier, and I wanted to come back and talk a little bit more about him, and that's Chauncey Billups. Obviously, that's a name Celtics fans are familiar with. He was, I guess the best way to describe it, and let's be real, he was the booby prize when you couldn't get Tim Duncan. The number 3 pick, the guy that, that the Celtics kind of felt they had to settle on. Now, as a potential head coaching candidate whose name has been talked about, what do you think a Chauncey Billups as the head coach of the Boston Celtics would look like? And would that be a good hire from your perspective if they went that route?
Yeah, I do think it'd be a good hire. I think he is very intelligent. He was a leader on his team. He's always been known for his basketball acumen. Now he's paying his dues as an assistant coach with the Clippers. He's young. The players remember Mr. Big Shot. They remember, now they might have been a little bit young during the 04. I think Tatum might have been 6 years old. I mean,
they got YouTube. They've seen it.
And Jalen might have been 7 or something. But they do remember those guys going to 7 consecutive Eastern Conference Finals and winning that 04 chip, and probably should have won in 05 if somebody covers Robert Horry. So Emmanuel. So you're talking about an accomplished guy, a well-respected guy, a guy who could have walked right into a general manager's position maybe in Cleveland or gone back to his hometown Denver and work with the Nuggets. So I think if he's interested and he wants to coach, I think that this is a great opportunity to get someone like that. You're looking for someone who can relate to the players, who the players can look to, and he can say, hey, this is how I got it done. I'm a champion. You want to see the ring? You want to see my all-star jerseys? You want don't question my resume. Right. I think that's important in the NBA. I think what we're finding out with the firing of Terry Stotts and Nate Bjorken today in Indiana, that quite honestly, that whippersnapper young assistant coach who never played the game, that doesn't work all the time. Everybody can't beat Brad or Eric Spoelstra. That's a more rare combination. And you see the effect and impact that Nate McMillan's having now on Atlanta. Nate, who I've never seen Nate smile.
You won't.
Yeah, just looks at them dudes and be like, played in the finals, played 15 years. You want to see my resume. I've been there. I didn't coach Brandon Roy. I didn't coach Ray Allen. I didn't coach Gary Payton. I have coached, greats. So step off, step back, Trae Young, and listen to what I'm saying. Mm-hmm. And I think that that's what this team needs. It needs a disciplinarian coach, a guy who can relate to the players, they can joke and laugh, but I ain't your friend, I'm your coach. But someone who can be a father figure, because that's what coaching is now. Yeah. I mean, you're like that with a lot of young people, Sherrod. You're a mentor, a friend, a life coach, a disciplinarian. I mean, you're all of the above. That's what the coach does today. You got to help these guys grow and mature. They're coming to the league so fast. They get money and women so fast, and you expect them to be these, listen to all your commands and to always be on time and all this. It's hard to be that young and grow in front of the world spotlight, grow in front of social media. Everybody's calling you trash after a bad game. So these guys need someone that they know has been there and they can listen to and who can say, you want to see my resume? You want to see some tape? I'll show you some tape. Want to see my awards? I'll bring him in one day. Like, you want to question me? I'll show you. And who lines himself with a good quality staff that can take this team to the next level. I think Brad did a good job, but there was just a disconnect this year. Yeah. I mean, as much as the Celtic faithful don't want to hear it, they were tuning Brad out. I hate to write that. I don't want to admit it, but it was true. It wasn't working. And I'm not saying it's Brad's fault, but I think after 8 years, Brad felt like, okay, I'm talking on deaf ears. Like, maybe it's time for a change. And I totally respect that, because 8 years is a long time for an NBA head coach. You're not Pop. You're not Eric Spoelstra. Look at Miami. Miami looked like they was about to, really put a hurting on Milwaukee. And, it's going to be a great first-round series. And just what happened? Broke down. It just, I'm not saying Spoelstra's the problem, but that happens. Mm-hmm. Look at it. I mean, and then if you, for full respect for what Stevens did, look at what Brooklyn's done to 2 games to Milwaukee without Harden.
Right.
The Celtics went 5 with the Nets, could have won game 1 with some luck and some shots, and competed with the Nets. They weren't beating them. They went 5. I mean, have you watched the Milwaukee-Brooklyn games?
It's pathetic, man.
It's like and one mixtape. It's like Brooklyn, and every time they get down the floor, it's like they probably play Sweet Georgia Brown.
Like, and the professor's going to the left, right, with a 22-foot pull-up jump shot.
And young kids, Google the Globetrotters. I'm looking for Geese Osby, Curly Neal, and Nate Branch. My favorite Globetrotter, by the way, Nate Branch. Curly Neal too, but look.
Curly Neal's my favorite, but go ahead.
Yeah, and Geese Osby and Meadowlark always look like Gross Meadowlark, because they were straight clowning the buck, like behind the back. And then Blake Griffin like the Celtics gave them not fits, but the Celtics pushed them a little bit at least with Harden. So I think that puts some type of a perspective on the job that Brad tried to do with a very limited roster. So. But I just think that in terms of what he did, he had a strong run, and I think he felt he was getting tired also.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at just the sheer numbers, I mean, only 2-3 coaches in Celtics history won more games than Brad Stevens. But the one thing that you pointed out, like when you're talking about Spoelstra and just some of the issues that they had in Miami, the one thing that for Spoelstra is always going to be that. That kryptonite against anyone who's trying to just say maybe they need to go in a different direction. He's got chips, plural, not singular. And that's the one crowning gem from Brad Stevens' time as the head coach that I think if you get that, that can overcome some of those shortcomings you may have as far as like not being a player. And just to get back to Chauncey, someone, as you know, Gary, I covered Chauncey when he was at the peak of his game in Detroit. So you know how I feel about Chauncey Billups.
I have no idea. You covered the Pistons?
But here's the thing. Yeah, they were kind of nice. The team today, not so much. The team I was with, they was kind of nice. The thing about Chauncey, though, that I've always liked and respected about him is as much as we talk about what he did in Detroit, the way he handled himself when he wasn't that guy before then. When he was traded to Orlando and Doc Rivers, and he was hurt at the time. I remember Doc told me a story about how Chauncey was that guy who was even though he couldn't physically be on the court, he did all his rehab. He was asking questions. He was being as involved as you could potentially be, rather than just being somebody who just showed up and just said, hey, and just kind of kept themselves apart from the team. He did everything he could to be a part of that team, give advice and all this stuff. And at that time, he was a young fella still. Mm-hmm. And to me, the fact that he understood that even though I'm not playing and I can't physically help him, I still can be involved. Those are the kind of skills that when you take those into account with his ability as a player, his leadership skills, the fact that he has been there, done that. And when you look at the Celtics roster, chances are every single scenario that is a dominant factor for a player, Chauncey's been through that. If you're a guy who thinks you should be getting more minutes, Chauncey's been there. If you're a guy who's the face of the franchise, but you're not really feeling you're getting the respect that you should, been there. If you've been hurt and it has kept you out from playing, and all of a sudden you're starting to get that stigma that maybe you're just an injury-riddled, injury-prone player. Romeo Langford, for example, Chauncey's been there. Done that. So he has the ability to connect, I think, with just about every possible situation. And to your point, Gary, I think was going to be key And it's, to me, it's the most fun. It's the most essential part of Steve Nash's success in Brooklyn. Isn't so much Steve Nash and his connection with the players, but the staff around him. If Chauncey were to be the head coach, that has to be priority number one. Get the right kind of staff around you because you know what your strengths are. Get guys who complement. And frankly, and if we're being honest and real, would not shock me if you find a woman on Chauncey's staff. Would not shock me.
Totally.
In fact, there are a couple that come immediately to mind. I don't think you can get Becky Hammond to be an assistant coach. In fact, she's going to be in the running to be a head coach. But Teresa Weatherspoon down in New Orleans, don't sleep. She's one of the greatest to ever play the game. And there's some others out there as well. So I think the key for him is finding the right fits around him if he were to get the job. But there's a lot of folks who we're going to be talking about in the coming.
I'll say this, Sherrod. Okay. One, the Celtics, and I've written this, they just got to diversify. Like, there's just too many, like, it was just too long. The one thing, it was too much of Danny, Austin Ainge, and Mike Zarin, and David Lewin. Like, you got to mix it up. You got to have some fresh voices. You got to put some color in there. You got to put some former players in there. You got to, Danny couldn't be the only former player. Like, you got to diversify. Some fresh voices. You've got to get some outside voices, some outside views of what people think of the Celtics. Bring in someone from, like if they're going to go after a guy like Ime Udoka, who's now on the sideline with the Brooklyn Nets. Okay, let's say Chauncey doesn't work out. Ime's watched close up the Celtics and say, I see what's the problem here. I know what I can do here. As I said, let's see what Allison Feaster, if she ends up benefiting from this and has more say in some of the things. Someone that nobody talks about, who's a woman, who's a coach, who's kicking ass, is Dawn Staley. She's coaching Team USA this year. You don't think she would listen if someone want her on their staff? She's done all she can in South Carolina. She's won chips. Now she's coaching Team USA. I bet you if they cruise to gold, her phone's going to ring. And let's be honest, let's not only talk about Becky Hammond. I respect Becky Hammond, but there's Kara Lawson. There's people around the league. I used to Teresa Weatherspoon. Mm-hmm. And then there's the former Duke guard Harding, who
with the Kings.
Yes. I mean, there's people who can be promoted and diversify the new coach's staff, but you also need some fresh faces and voices in the front office. Better talent evaluators. Okay, they just missed on guys, man. Like, they just missed. They gave away the first-round pick to Memphis, who they take Desmond Bane, who shoots 43% this year from three. And then Memphis also took Xavier Tillman, a mean brother who looked like he could have played in the ABA.
MSU.
You look at Xavier Tillman. That dude don't look on 23. Like, bro, I want to see your ID. About 32, man.
He was that kid, that kid in the 15 and under who looked like he was 24.
Yeah, exactly. Like, hey, bro, did you play Michigan State with?
And your son should be out here playing, not you. Where's your son at?
Well, did you play with Charlie Bell in there? Did you come into Michigan State with Charlie Bell and my team? Like, damn, bro, you still here? Like,
Yeah.
Like, how you still on campus, bro? You're 12
need cats
year.
like that.
Tillman, they missed out on that. The drafting of the Romeo Grant Williams draft, and then trading Matisse Thybulle to get Carson Edwards, like kind of fooling. I mean, Matisse Thybulle couldn't help this team at all. Like there was some real misses. Okay, and that's talent evaluation. And I like Grant Williams, good kid, honest kid, but what is he going to be at this level? Pretty much what he is, unless he really improves offensively. Like he can hit the occasional corner ball three. He's a undersized five. He's a bruiser. He fouls hard. But that was one of your first round picks, and he's played. Romeo showed some potential, but like they botched some drafts. The reason why the Celtics did not have a good bench is because of Danny's lack of drafting. Gershon and Ante Zizic, when Pascal Siakam was on the board. A lot of teams passed on Siakam much, so it's not only the Celtics. Or missing on Keldon Johnson, the kid from San Antonio, who went late first round. Like, there are some misses there. And so you need some new faces, new blood, talent. Get one of these sharp-ass ESPN guys to evaluate, hey, there's a kid French second league French player. There's some kid in Australia. There's some kid in Ghana. Like it can't be Vincent Poirier. Like that can't be the best you could do. Daniel Tice worked out. You signed Vincent Poirier to a 2-year deal, and it took 2 weeks to figure out he couldn't play.
Well,
am I wrong? Like the training camp, I'm sure Brad. One of the reasons why Brad wants to be in charge is Brad looks at this kid, this big kid who looks like he should be a bouncer up at one of Boston's nightclubs, and he can't play. And Brad's like, "We got this dude for 2 years. Like I can't play him. Where did he come from? They signed him to a 2-year deal. He's out the league now. Gershon out the league. Zizek out the league. Or over. Like you can't miss like that. All these assets and draft picks that the Celtics had and Ainge had, a lot of them were botched. We can go back to James Young and R.J. Hunter. You know, like it's unfortunate. You're gonna late first rounders. You're gonna miss on. Like that's not a sin to miss on. But like the 15, the 10 to 20, not the lottery. He landed on Brown. He landed on Smart. He landed on Tatum. I mean, he got over on Philly for the Martell Fultz and Tatum. Like that was unfair. That ain't right. Yeah. Like Danny should have had a mask and put your hands up for that one. Okay, those are some highlights, but there's been some lowlights, and so to me, you can't run it back with the same staff and the same talent evaluators. Get some new guys in here. There's guys all over the world who assess college basketball and international basketball and get you some guys in who can help you. Desmond Bane, have you seen that dude, how he's built?
Oh, he's built he's bigger than Marcus Smart.
He's got a grown ass. How do you pass on him? That dude, he was 4-year senior, so he's going to help you right away.
Yeah.
He's 4 years at TCU. He coming in, and you trade that pick to Memphis because you don't want to pay a first rounder. Like, you got to figure that out. Like, you need those type of guys.
Yeah, and I will say this. I mean, Remy Cofield, he's been doing a lot. I think he's like the GM of the main Red Claws, and I think he's part of that inner framework brain trust that's going to be evaluating and in the Celtics front office. And I think that's one step towards, I think, having a little bit more diversity of thought, because really that's really what this comes down to. Not so much a person that looks a certain way or is a certain gender, but just do you have a different set of ideas that are percolating within the inner framework of your organization. I think that's
someone who played the game who might be look at a guy and go, that dude can't play.
Right.
I don't like his body like. And I said it's a crapshoot nowadays. Mm-hmm. You got dudes coming in from this league elite. Now there's this overtime elite that they signed in. They're 12-year-olds. I mean, it's going to get even crazier. Okay,
it is
that because these dudes is coming out of nowhere, and you don't know when you're getting Luka, or you don't know when you're getting, you know what I'm saying. Or when you're getting Cody Zeller, like you just don't know. Right. Cody Zeller was a All-American in Indiana, and he can't. You know what I'm saying? Like in Luka, people had no clue that Luka was good. No one had any clue Luka was going to be this good. Nobody. Right. Or even Trae Young. Oh, he's too small. He can't shoot. He's like Steph, but he's smaller. Okay. You know what I'm saying? Like it's a crapshoot, but you've got to improve your odds to land in a draft. Because you have to your roster can't be built strictly through free agency. Look at the Lakers. Okay, the Lakers. Let's sign Andre Drummond. Did that work? Montrezl because he got a Z in there.
Exactly.
Montrezl. Dennis Schroeder lost in the first round. Like you can't build your bench strictly through free agency. The Celtics need to get a better draft foundation.
Well, the one thing that certainly when I think about that comes to mind, and you kind of touched on it a little bit, is when you talk about having diverse voices in the conversation, one of the things, and I was reminded of that by the way Portland handled the firing of Terry Stotts. When they fired Terry Stotts and they said, Terry, you're fired, or we're going to mutually part ways, however the hell they want to phrase that, the first person they talked to after they did that was Dame Lillard. Which to me it seems like a no-brainer, but we see a lot of organizations don't necessarily do that. I mean, different sport altogether, obviously, but if the Green Bay Packers, for example, would have reached out to Aaron Rodgers and told him, we're going to draft a quarterback as your heir apparent before they drafted him, or right after they had convinced themselves to do that, I don't know if they'd be in the pickle that they're in. With the Celtics, Jaylen Brown, Jason Tatum, I think, have clearly set themselves apart from the rest of the players on this organization. How involved do you think those two guys should be? Not so much in the decisions that are being made, but just the fact that decisions are being made. Should they be, should they get that phone call? Like if the Celtics decide to trade for whoever it is, should they be the first one that gets that call saying that's going to happen? Should they get that call before it happens? How do you think they should what role should they play in this team's building going forward?
I don't think either of them want to be like player/GM. I mean, I don't think either of them are comfortable like going, yeah, get that guy or hire this coach. But I do think they would like to be and should be consulted on these type of deals. The thing is, you got to keep these two guys in Boston, because sooner or later, a few years from now, that opt-out year is going to be coming or whatever, and it's going to be that like Giannis situation where Boston, oh my God, is Tatum going to come back? Should we trade Tatum? All this stuff is going to come up. And if he's not happy, the same with Brown. Okay, you have a 23-year-old dude who's likely going to make the All-NBA team and a 24-year-old who could have made it with some luck and some health, but was both coming off All-Star season. So you got to keep both of them at Boston and both of them happy. Now, you don't follow all their orders and let them play GM, but you do consult and discuss. And I think both of them, I think Brown is probably more opinion on what should happen. Tatum is sort of like, listen, as long as I get along with them, I just want a ball, and they'll feature me like I want to be featured, and we win it. Because I think the thing is, championships is where it matters. Those guys want to win. And people, Tatum don't want to win. Tatum won't want to be on commercials. I think Tatum is a cutthroat, fiery competitor. He just doesn't show it. You don't think he liked dropping 50 on KD in game 3? He enjoyed that, believe me. Like, he wants to get his respect as a top 10 player. He does, as much as he got all these little photos with LeBron and KD when he was a young dude, and he looks up to him, but he also wants to kill him. And that's what you want. And the same with Jaylen Brown. So I think you talk to them about it, but I don't think you let them in the room and let them help make final decisions. That's what management is for. But I do think you do consult with them. And, what is your relationship like with Chauncey? Have you ever talked to him? Yeah, I have. I talked to him in Detroit once, or at the All-Star, or he pulled me aside, or at the Player Association meeting. Something, just get what your experiences are with him or Sam Cassell or any other names that are out there and see what they think of those guys. You don't let that determine your final decision. But you don't want a coach that I don't like this dude. Now, that's rare. Most of these guys probably don't know them that well, but you also want to take their opinions into account.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And I think that, to your point, I think Jaylen is a little bit more comfortable, kind of putting his 2 cents in there. And the thing about Tatum that I sensed was that as the playoffs went on, that killer that you talk about seemed to be a little bit more obvious. Remember almost every time he would get touched going to the rim, he'd give you the hands up like, why didn't I get the call? And now it seems there's more. He's finishing those plays, giving the ref the stare down, thinking like, okay, I didn't get that call, but you're going to give me the next one, and gets back and plays. It's like he's been able to play through a lot of the frustrations that I thought he had earlier, and that has made him, I think, a better player. And I think, frankly, it's made him a better leader. And speaking of better, one of the things we like to do here is we like to end on the best note, and that is a game or games. We're going to play a game called Pick and Roll, Gary. Pick and Roll. And this is what happens. I'm going to make a statement. You make a pick, and you explain why you're rolling with that pick. Are you ready?
Ready as I ever be.
Bigger impact. Brad Stevens in his first year as president of basketball ops, or the new Boston Celtics head coach?
New head coach.
Why?
I just think he'll give a fresh voice, new staff. They'll do better. I think Brad, his moves are limited because of the salary cap. Let's see what happens with Kemba Walker. Let's see what happens with some of the other guys on the bench. But they don't have a bunch of money to make a bunch of moves. There's going to be some trades. It's is Brad going to pull off some huge deals just to make a splash? I think he'll be very calculated in his moves. I think the first-year head coach will have a bigger impact.
Okay. All right. Fill the lane. I'm going to make a statement, and you fill in the blank. All right. The rotation guy you don't expect to see on this Boston Celtics team next year is blank.
Wow. I mean, like, I'd say Grant Williams.
Okay. I'll buy that.
Yeah.
One more game, and we'll leave on this one. All right. It's called Starting Five. And I'm going to say 5 words or phrases, and you're going to give me the first word that comes to mind. All right. Celtics head coach.
Chauncey Billups.
Woo. Robert Williams III.
A nice extension, but with a lot of incentives, including games played.
2021 NBA champion.
Brooklyn Nets.
Woo. Okay. Aaron Nesmith.
Potential to be a solid rotation guy, maybe a starter down the road, but work on that jumper. Showed a lot of perseverance and Gil during that rookie year. Liked him.
Okay. And the last but certainly not least statement, which is probably the most important one we got. Syracuse basketball.
Wow. Is Jerry McNamara back for another year?
I hate you. You know damn well he's a coach.
Is he a coach now?
I hate you.
Shit, he's the all-time leading scorer, assist man, games played. I mean, my goodness.
I hate you.
He led him to 7 tournaments. I mean, he should be able to coach.
I hate you so much.
I'm just saying.
That is all we got time for today. Such a best. I hate Gary Washburn. Always a pleasure, Gary Washburn. Always a pleasure. All seriously though, good stuff. Good stuff as always, G. Check out his work on the Boston Globe website, app, and all your different. And also your book is still out there. You can plug that. Anything else you got coming? A podcast or anything else that you got that we can plug now?
Well, Washburn Files podcast. And hopefully my guest next week will be none other than Sherrod Blakely. We'll see if we can.
Oh, wow. Talk to the agent.
Yeah.
We'll see if we can book you.
I'm going to call your people. I'm going to call your people now.
You call my people, and then my people will let me know.
Your people. Yeah, the Washburn Files podcast. And yeah, it should be exciting off season. Finally, we're getting back to Summer League. So hopefully the fans will get some normalcy back. But yeah, it should be a great summer.
Absolutely. I agree. And again, Gary Washburn, thanks for coming on as always. I'm glad that you got a chance to take your shots at Syracuse because that's what you do. His school is Cal Cubbies, Cal Bears.
I just asked a question about the roster. That was all.
I hate you.
I was like, damn, how much? Damn, Jerry McNamara, like he could have helped. I mean, how many scored against Houston when they lost that game? Like,
go away. Just go.
I know Buddy Boeheim. I mean, he's gonna be there for 3-4 more years. I know that.
Where's my mute button? Let me get this dude out of here.
Was he a freshman now?
Just go away.
He's gonna have that COVID year. He's gonna be there till 2030.
I hate Gary. I so hate him so much. I don't know why. I don't know. I'm gonna blame Abu, our producer, for getting you on here. That's what I'm gonna blame. It's Abu's fault that I'm dealing with this nonsense. Anyway, Gary Washburn, Boston Globe. Always a pleasure. Sometimes.
Every now and then.
I'll talk to you soon, brother.